Afternoon, girls. Okay, some of you have asked me to do an in the hoop design to show you how to follow the instruction that Darlene has given us. Some of you are a little bit confused, so I'm going to try and sort that out for you. Let's decide first of all which block we're going to do and print out the PDF. I've done that. I'm going to do the dragonfly that everyone has requested. So this is in the hoop block 12A. Once you have decided that, print out the PDF. If you've got software, then bring the design 12A dragonfly into your software program and make sure it fits into your hoop. Once you've done that, you can then put your design onto your USB or onto your stick or whatever it needs to go onto your machine. Mine goes on a USB. Put it on the USB and then take it to your machine. And once you've done that, you can bring the design then into your hoop ready to sew. The next thing you have to make sure is that you have at least 3 bobbins with the colour that you're going to do your blocks with. I have chosen this colour to do all my blocks, which gives you this colour around here. So you need to know what colour you are going to do your stitches. I've just used a plain colour, and when the block on the back is done, it still comes out that, which is why you need your bobbins the same colour as your front fabric cotton. See that colour cotton, and on the front you can see how all the outlines are done with that same colour cotton. When we are cutting our backing fabric, I've cut them in different sizes. My blocks will all end up the same size once I trim them, and I trim them down to, I think it's 12 inches. 2700 or 10.5. So 10.5 inches, but I start off with a bigger block. So I start off with a bigger block, and then once all the sewing has been done, I will trim them down to 10.5 inches, which gives me approximately ½ inch on each side to trim to make sure they all end up the same size. So my top of my blocks, I've cut my fabric 13 inches square or 330 centimetres. I've also cut the wadding the same size as the block because I am going to hoop the wadding. I am not going to hoop as Darlene has hooped stabiliser. I am using my wadding as the stabiliser. I have used, it is called bamboo wadding or bamboo backing or bamboo, what's the other word they usually use? Wadding or backing. Anyway, it's not a stabiliser, it's a backing. So girls, one side's fluffy, one side's not. So that's the back. For the backing part of our designs, because you have a top part, you have the wadding that I have hooped in the machine in the middle, and on the back part you have another piece of fabric. Because I didn't want any of the stitches to show through on the back because it will be a reversible quilt, I have also put an extra piece of batting between the 2 pieces, but I'll get to that as we go along. As you can see, there's the batting in there, which I trimmed off. So we will need fabric for the front, wadding for the front. I will cut the backing wadding piece smaller, and I've only cut that 12 inches square or 300 centimetres square. That's the wadding. And I've cut the fabric for the back the same size as the front, which was the 12 inch or 300 centimetres square for the back. So that will go underneath once we get there and be held up wrong side towards the right side of the fabric. I'll get to that, girls, when we get there. So at this stage, we've printed out our instructions. We've got our hoop ready, we've got a pair of scissors ready, and then we've decided that we're going to have normal fabric for our blocks, and I have chosen 3 fabrics to utilise in my designs. So this is my fabric that I'm using in every single block, and then I have chosen 2 fabrics to go with that to highlight the colours of the flowers in this fabric. So I've got 3 fabrics for doing the dragonfly or the bee or any of the other designs in the hoop projects, and I've got my normal block fabric. You all know how to hoop, girls, so I am going to stop the tape and I'm going to hoop up just the wadding. Actually, leave the tape go and I'll just hoop up my wadding. So where Darlene has said here, hoop your stabilizer, I am just going to hoop my wadding because I don't want stabilizer in it. So I'm finding the centre by folding it in half and half again. I'm going to put it in my machine. I've got the fluffy side up. There's my halfway points. Put them straight into my hoop, like so. And we're ready to start. So Darlene step 1 says hoop 1 layer of cutaway stabilizer. Now you can do that. I'm not using stabilizer. I didn't want stabilizer in there. All I wanted was the wadding because I wanted my quilt to be quite warm. They live in Perth and it gets down to quite cool. Once you've hooped that, it says add a layer of batting. You can use any batting of your choice. Now girls, if you're using stabilizer, just put a piece of batting over the top of that like that. I'm hooping the batting, so I'm not going to put batting in. So girls, we've got our wadding in our hoop. We've got that hooped inside our hoop. Now on Darlene's it says here, place your batting over this guide. Now stitch the second step. It's actually not, it's actually the first step. So we're just going to start from 1 by placing our batting over the top of our stabilizer and our fabric just resting over the top of our batting and our stabilizer. I'm just putting fabric over the batting. I'm not using stabilizer. Then we're going to go and put it on the machine and stitch number 1. Number 1 will now hold your fabric and your batting, if you're using a stabilizer, onto your hoop. You can trim your stabilizer later. It's a bit hard to trim it at the moment. But stitches number 1 will stitch your fabric down, and it will also stitch the outline for where your moon fabric is going to go. Then Darlene says here, add a layer of fabric over the guide and make sure it's about 1 inch larger. Well, we've already done that. I did that in step 1. Add the layer of fabric over the whole area and stitch the next step to tack it down. I've done that in 1 lot rather than in 2 because it has a tack down, and then the moon, she's done that all in 1. So the next thing to do now is that over the page, it says stitch the moon shape onto your first layer of fabric, which is the run stitch. It will show you how big to cut the fabric. Your moon shape is already there. She's incorporated that in this outline fabric. So what we do is we find the fabric we're going to use for our moon. I've decided to do blue. I've cut a little bit of blue fabric, so I'm going to make sure my blue fabric is big enough to just lay over the top of the moon shape. So the moon shape goes up to here, down around the bottom here, and over to the left. So I'm just floating that once again on top of my fabric. Then I'm going to go over to the sewing machine again, and we're going to sew stitches number 2. So when we sew stitches number 2, girls, as you can see, it will stitch down around the moon shape where I've placed the blue fabric. I'm going to turn this off until this finishes sewing, but it will just stitch that moon shape down for us, and then we will trim the fabric. Okay, just to recap, girls, in Darlene's instructions, it says put your wadding on the batting, do your outline, trim it. That doesn't actually happen when you sew it. What happens is the outline and the moon shape sews all in one go in step number 1. So step number 2 is put your moon fabric down, or the fabric you're going to use for your moon, and stitch again, and then we'll end up with the moon shape being stitched down onto your fabric. Now we're going to trim all around that as close as we can without cutting our fabric, and the best way to do that is to get yourself a nice pair of good scissors and hold your scissors at a probably a 45-degree angle, And what you will do is you will cut close to the stitches at a 45-degree angle and just get rid of the fabric you don't want. So anything that belongs to the moon you'll keep, and anything that doesn't belong to the moon we're going to cut off. Remember, you always turn your scissors, you always turn your hoop, you never turn your scissors when you're trimming, girls. Something my Nana taught me and I have stuck by it. So if I'm going around this curve like this and it's awkward, I turn my hoop, not my scissors, and I keep cutting. You can stop there, honey, for a minute. Keep going then.
Keep going. Just watch the other hand that's in front of the camera.
So girls, I'm just keeping my scissors at that 45-degree angle, and I'm just cutting close to the stitches without cutting the stitches, and keeping my hand at a 45-degree angle, and I'm moving the hoop rather than trying to move my scissors around the board. So move your hoop, not the scissors, and when we finish I'll show you what it looks like. And I'm sorry that my hand's in the way. And there you have it, girls. We've trimmed all the fabric off that does not belong to the moon. Just to recap on the fabric, I did pull this out for you. I get my fabric from Spotlight or my fabric store. It is 100% cotton. Okay, step number 3, girls, and then that piece goes into my fabric stash to be used later on in the process of what we're doing. So the next lot of stitches, information Darlene said here, add a layer of fabric using 100% cotton in a different cream print over this shape and stitch the next step, which will tack down in place, carefully cut away the fabric. Well, we've done that. So the next one, which will be stitches number 3, which will be the next step. So the next step we will do is stitch the next step, which will outline the next area to be filled behind the dragonfly. So without doing anything else, we're going to put this back into the machine, and the machine then will stitch an outline of where our next piece of fabric will sit. So back to the machine. So this is stitches number 3, which will be the outline of where the dragonfly will go. So we will let that sew and we'll be back in a moment.